Imagine a stone, not a brick you can hold in your hand, not a boulder you can roll down a hill. Imagine a block of solid granite the size of a house. It weighs 100 tons. Now, look at the edges. They are not straight. They are curved. They turn corners like folded paper. They bulge slightly, like a loaf of bread that rose in the oven. And next to it, another stone of a completely different shape fits into it perfectly. There is no mortar. There is no cement. There is only a fit so precise that a human hair cannot pass between them. How do you cut 100 tons of rock into a jigsaw puzzle? How do you lift it? How do you press it against its neighbor until the two become one? The history books tell us about copper chisels and wooden rollers. They tell us about thousands of workers pulling ropes for decades. But when you stand in front of these walls, your eyes tell you a different story. Your eyes tell you that these stones were not carved. They were softened. Find a comfortable position. Turn off the lights if you can. What you are about to hear has been sitting in stone, in clay, in the ground beneath cities, for thousands of years. Nobody was supposed to find it. And yet, here we are. If you are the kind of person who suspects that history gave us the short version, you are in the right place. Hit subscribe and stay with me. Because tonight, we are going to dig. We are going to find the builders who treated mountains like clay. The high peaks of the Andes are thin and cold. This is the roof of the world. Here, the air is quiet. The earth is hard. According to the records we are taught in school, a tribe of warriors called the Inca rose to power here only 500 years ago. They were masters of organization. They built an empire that stretched for thousands of miles. They were brilliant, but they did not have iron. They did not have the wheel. They did not have a written language as we understand it. And yet, in the heart of their capital, we find structures that defy every law of primitive engineering. We are told they used river stones to beat the granite into shape. We are told they spent months grinding one surface against another until they matched. Look at the scale. Look at the sheer volume of material moved from quarries miles away, across valleys, and up onto these ridges. The official story is one of endless, grueling labor. It is a story of primitive people achieving the impossible through sheer willpower. It is a noble story. It makes us feel superior to the past. But it ignores the most important detail. It ignores the signature left in the rock itself. These walls were built to last forever. They have survived earthquakes that leveled modern cities. They have stood while the world around them crumbled into dust. But what if the myth is not a story? What if it is a memory? Look closely at the surface of these massive stones. You will often see small, strange bumps near the bottom. They look like handles, or perhaps they are marks left by a mold. Archaeologists call them protuberances. They say they were used to help tie ropes or lever the stones into place. But if that were true, why are they only on some stones and not others? Why are they often found on the most complex, curved pieces? Now travel across the ocean, cross the Atlantic, cross the Mediterranean, stand in the sun-drenched plains of Turkey. Here, the Hittites built a city called Alaka Huyuk. Look at the base of their gates. The stones are huge. The joints are zigzags. The corners are rounded. It is the same handwriting. It is the same impossible puzzle. Now, travel further east, all the way to Japan. In the foundations of the great castles, beneath the wooden pagodas and the modern steel, you find them again. Huge, multi-sided blocks, perfectly fitted without a drop of glue. The Japanese call this style honeycombing. They say it was done to protect against the shaking of the earth. And they are right. These walls do not break. They dance. When the earth moves, the stones shift slightly, then settle back into their perfect grip. Think about the odds. 3 different cultures, 3 different continents, thousands of miles of water between them. And yet, they all chose the most difficult way to build. They didn't use square bricks. Square bricks are easy. They used stones with 12 angles. They used stones that weigh as much as a blue whale. Why would someone choose the hardest path? Unless for them, it wasn't hard at all. Consider a different possibility. What if we are looking at these walls through the wrong lens? We see hard stone and think of hammers. We see weight and think of pulleys. But what if the stone wasn't hard when it was placed? Imagine a technology that does not use fire, a technology that does not use vibration. Imagine a way to change the very molecular structure of the rock. For a few hours, the granite becomes like warm plastic. It becomes like cold butter. You wouldn't need a chisel to make 2 stones fit. You would simply push them together. The weight of the top stone would squeeze into the gaps of the bottom one. It would create that perfect, curved, organic lip that we see today. There are legends in the Amazon of a bird, a small, shy bird that nests in holes in the cliffs. The locals say this bird carries a leaf in its beak. It rubs the leaf against the rock until the stone softens. Then it pecks out a home for its eggs. When the bird is finished, the stone hardens again. Chemists have laughed at this for a century. But recently, explorers have found plants in those same forests that contain acids capable of eating through limestone in minutes. But granite is different. Granite is one of the hardest substances on Earth. To soften granite, you don't need chemistry. You need physics. There is a secret hidden in sound. We know that certain frequencies can shatter glass. Could loosen the bonds of the mountain, could loosen the bonds of the mountain itself. What if the whistle mentioned in the ancient myths was not a signal? What if it was the tool? Imagine standing in the center of a silent stone circle. You are in Peru. You look at the stones and you see a specific pattern, a way of locking the blocks together using a hidden joint, a notch that you can only see if you pull the stones apart. Now, fly 10,000 miles across the Pacific. You stand in the shadow of a temple in Japan. You look at the foundation. You find the same hidden notch, the same invisible lock. This is not a coincidence. This is a blueprint. When we look at these walls, we are not looking at local art. We are looking at a global language of construction. In the ancient world, there were no borders as we know them. There were no maps that stopped at the edge of the ocean. There was a shared understanding of the earth itself. The builders did not care about the distance between continents. They cared about the resonance of the stone. Think about the precision required. To make 2 massive stones fit so tightly that they survive for 5,000 years requires a level of math that we only recently mastered. They were calculating the weight, the pressure, and the way the earth breathes during an earthquake. They were not just building walls, they were building stabilizers for the planet. Everywhere we find these walls, we find the same story. The people who lived there later, the Inca, the Japanese lords, the Hittite kings, they all used these stones as the foundation for their own work. They built their smaller, rougher walls on top of the giants. It is as if they were scavenging the ruins of a golden age they could not replicate. They knew the stones were special. They knew the ground beneath them was sacred. But where did the teachers go? If this knowledge was global, why did it vanish everywhere at the same time? There is a moment in the history of every great civilization where the light simply goes out. We call it the Dark Ages. But for the builders of the stone, the darkness was literal. High in the mountains of Bolivia, there is a place called Tiahuanaco. It sits at an altitude where the air is too thin to breathe comfortably. Here, the stones are even more precise. They are cut with internal grooves that look like they were made by a high-speed router. They have small holes drilled into them that are perfectly straight, perfectly circular. And then, everything stops. In the middle of the plaza, there are stones that were halfway to being placed. There are blocks with half-finished joints. The tools were dropped. The workers walked away. Or perhaps they were taken. Geologists have looked at the sediment around these sites. They found evidence of a massive, sudden cataclysm, a wall of water, a shifting of the Earth's crust. In a single night, the world changed. The oceans rose, the mountains groaned, the cities of the stone builders were shattered. The survivors were few. They fled into the caves, they fled into the jungles. They carried the memory of the soft stone in their songs and their stories. But the machines, or the instruments, were lost to the mud. When they finally came back out into the sun, the world was cold. The fire was gone. And the secret of the whistle, the secret of the frequency, had been buried under 1,000 feet of silt. This was the first burial, the burial by nature. But it would not be the last. What did they actually know? If we set aside our pride, we can begin to see the traces of a science we do not yet understand. They knew that stone is not dead. To us, a rock is a solid, motionless object. To them, it was a frequency. They understood that every element has a heartbeat. If you can match that heartbeat, you can change its state. You can make the heavy feel light. You can make the hard feel soft. Walk through the corridors of the ancient sites at night. If you listen closely, you can hear it. The stones hum. It is a very low vibration, right at the edge of human hearing. In some chambers, the shape of the walls is designed to amplify this sound. If you stand in the right spot and speak, your voice doesn't just echo. It vibrates through your bones. They were not just building shelters. They were building resonators. They understood the grid of the earth. They placed their walls on specific lines of energy, points where the magnetic field of the planet is slightly different. They were plugging into the world itself. They didn't need electricity because they had gravity. They didn't need engines because they had resonance. Imagine a world where the very ground beneath your feet was a source of power, a world where you could move a mountain with a song. This is the knowledge that was taken from us, not because it was dangerous, but because it made us free. And a person who can move mountains is very difficult to rule. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the Andes, they saw the great walls of Cusco. They didn't see engineering. They didn't see science. They saw the work of the devil. To them, anything that could not be explained by their own books was a sin. They began a systematic destruction. They tore down the temples. They tried to pull apart the polygonal walls, but they failed. Their iron bars bent. Their hammers cracked. The stones remained, locked in their perfect ancient grip. Since they could not destroy the walls, they chose the second best option. They buried them. They built their cathedrals directly on top of the ancient foundations. They covered the impossible masonry with plaster and paint. They burned the records, the knotted strings of the Inca and the oral histories of the elders. They replaced a world of resonance with a world of dogma. But it wasn't just the church. Later, a new kind of burial began, the burial of the university. 19th century historians decided that the timeline of humanity was a straight line. We started as hunters, we became farmers, we became builders. This line does not allow for a global civilization that moved mountains with sound 5,000 years ago. It doesn't fit the graph. So, when a researcher finds a stone in Turkey that matches a stone in Peru, the discovery is not celebrated. It is ignored. It is called an outlier. It is labeled as a coincidence. The evidence is buried under a mountain of paperwork and academic ridicule. We are told to trust the copper chisel. We are told to ignore our own eyes. The knowledge was not lost. It was discarded because it was too heavy for our modern story to carry. In the last decade, we have begun to look at the world differently. We are building laboratories where we levitate small objects using nothing but sound waves. We call it acoustic levitation. We watch as heavy droplets of water or tiny bits of metal float in the air, held by an invisible hum. We are rediscovering the leaf that softens the rock. Botanists are studying the rare plants of the high jungle, finding chemical compounds that can break the surface tension of minerals. We are realizing that the myths were actually technical manuals, written in a language we had forgotten how to read. Even now, underneath our feet, the record is resurfacing. Ground-penetrating radar is finding more of these walls beneath the sands of Egypt and the forests of China. We are finding that the world is much older than we thought, and the builders were much more like us than we dared to imagine. They weren't aliens. They weren't gods. They were humans who had mastered the natural world instead of fighting it. And that same potential is still inside us. Every time we stand in front of a polygonal wall and feel that strange, low vibration in our chest, we are remembering. If they could soften the stone, what else could they do? If they understood the resonance of the earth, what did they know about the resonance of the human body? What did they know about the mind? We look at these walls and we ask, how did they build this? But maybe the real question is, why did they stop? Was it just a flood? Or did we reach a point where we became too focused on the tools and forgot the song? The next time you walk past an old stone building in your city, look at the foundation. Look at the way the rocks fit together. Most of it will be simple, but once in a while, you might see a corner that is too smooth, a joint that is too tight, a curve that feels like it was once soft. And you have to wonder, if the knowledge to move mountains is still sitting there in the silent gray stone, who is waiting for us to find the key? We have traveled a long way tonight, from the thin air of the Andes to the castle floors of Japan. It is a journey that changes the way you look at the ground beneath your feet. Thank you for staying with me until the end. This search for what was hidden is a long one, and we are only just beginning to scratch the surface. I have a question for you tonight. If you could rediscover one lost skill from the ancient world, whether it is the ability to soften stone or the secret of the Earth's resonance, which one would you choose and why? Let me know in the comments. I read every one of them. This has been The Forgotten Knowledge. If you feel that history has more to tell us, join us. There is much more to uncover.